When looking at outside commentators and how they perceive our books, particularly The Dragon Legacy, it becomes very clear that many are not interested in understanding the work at all. They are interested in using it. They take the language, the symbolism, the bloodline material, and the Dragon Court legacy, then twist it for their own ill will and monetary gain. They present themselves as experts on our bloodline, our motives, our history, and our work, while building their own platforms from the very material they misrepresent. The uncomfortable truth is that it makes them more money to cast us as the evil ones. It sells more books, videos, lectures, podcasts, and conspiracies to portray the dragon bloodline as the hidden hand ruling the world. It is far more profitable to say there is one ancient family, one secret bloodline, one sinister force controlling everything from behind the curtain. That version is simple, it is dramatic, it gives frightened people a villain, it gives the commentator a stage. However, when a real historian actually does the research, the picture changes completely. The truth is not that one bloodline controls the world. The truth is that control mechanisms have been used throughout history to govern society as a whole. These mechanisms are far older and far wider than any one family, dynasty, order, court, church, or state. They are found in religion, monarchy, law, education, class, war, shame, fear, money, inheritance, propaganda, and the stories people are taught to believe about themselves. The raw truth is this: none of us are safe from these systems. Not the poor, not the wealthy, not the royal, not the common, not the believer, not the skeptic, not the bloodline researcher, not the person laughing at bloodline research. Every generation inherits the machinery that came before it, and every generation is shaped by stories it did not personally write. This is where the bigger picture of genealogy and genetics becomes important. When one studies ancestry properly, the idea of one isolated bloodline ruling everything begins to collapse. Humanity is interwoven, nobility married into nobility, but common lines also entered noble lines. Royal blood spread outward. Families rose, fell, married, remarried, migrated, vanished, and reappeared under different names. After enough centuries, the neat fantasy of one separate, untouchable ruling bloodline becomes historically impossible. We are all far more related than people realize. So, how can one bloodline be responsible for the condition of the world? It cannot. That is the illusion. The real issue is not one bloodline. The real issue is the system of control that taught people to blame one bloodline while ignoring the machinery operating around them. The dragon was made into the monster because the monster needed somewhere to hide. If people are kept staring at the symbol, they may never look at the structure behind it. The issue then becomes the ongoing persecution of my dragon bloodline. In many ways, I am put through the very same impossible test that witches once were. There is no outcome in which the accused is allowed to be innocent. If the woman floated, she was a witch. If she sank, she was dead but innocent. If she survived, then she must have used some satanic power to preserve herself, as the accusation created a circle with no escape, because the truth was never the point. The point was persecution. That same mechanism is still being used today, only under a different mask. When outsiders accuse my bloodline, my father's work, or the Royal Dragon Court legacy of attempting to enslave humanity, they are not engaging with what the books actually say. They are building a modern witch trial around a symbol they do not understand. If we speak about bloodlines, they say we are claiming superiority. If we speak about sovereignty, they say we want control. If we expose corruption, they say we are part of it. If we defend ourselves, they say we are proving their point. There is no fair hearing in that kind of theatre. Yet the accusation is so far from the truth of what our books set out to do. The work of our bloodline is not the enslavement of humanity. We refute slavery of every kind: physical slavery, mental slavery, spiritual slavery, financial slavery, historical slavery, and the slavery created when people are taught to fear their own power. Our work exposes these systems. It does not serve them. Again and again, the books point towards sovereignty, self-knowledge, responsibility, and the right of mankind to govern its own path and destiny. We do not tell people to bow before us. We tell them to stand up. We do not ask them to surrender their minds. We ask them to use them. We do not present ourselves as saviors. We push people to use their own skills, their own discernment, their own intelligence, and their own courage for the betterment of themselves and those around them. That is the true motive. Not enslavement, liberation. The uncomfortable truth is that those who accuse us of control often rely upon control themselves. They need a villain. They need the dragon to remain monstrous because their own platform depends upon it. They need their audience frightened, suspicious, dependent, and hungry for the next revelation. In that sense, they are using the very mechanism they accuse us of creating. They sell fear while accusing us of power. They sell suspicion while claiming to reveal truth. They sell the persecution of a bloodline while pretending to liberate humanity from persecution. And this is why the witch trial comparison matters. It shows that the method has not disappeared. The target has merely changed. Once it was the woman with herbs, the healer, the widow, the outsider, the one who did not conform. Now it is the bloodline, the symbol, the author, the researcher, the one who refuses to let others define their history for profit. The dragon has been placed in the dock and told to confess to crimes it did not commit, but the work itself tells a different story. It asks people to think, to research, to question, to reclaim their sovereignty, and to stop handing their destiny to priests, kings, governments, gurus, false experts, conspiracy merchants, or bloodline fantasists. That is not slavery, that is the breaking of chains. In my own books, I show that this persecution did not begin with modern conspiracy writers, nor with outsiders who now twist the dragon legacy for their own gain. It stretches back through scripture, myth, religion, medicine, and history itself. From the days of the Bible, the serpent was not always a figure of evil. Before it was cast down and reduced into the image of the devil, the serpent carried older meanings of knowledge, wisdom, renewal, and awakening. It was a symbol that asked man to see, to question, and to understand. Yet once knowledge became dangerous to those who wished to govern the mind, the symbol of knowledge had to be demonized. The same pattern appears again with healing. The serpent once represented health, medicine, and restoration, yet that too was diminished and turned into something suspect. The healer, the herbalist, the wise woman, and the one who understood the natural world were no longer protectors of life, but threats to authority. Healing became witchcraft, knowledge became sin, nature became pagan, the independent mind became dangerous. Again and again, the same mask is placed over the same truth. Pan, once a god of wild nature, fertility, instinct, and the untamed world, was later folded into darker imagery until the horned god became confused with the devil, and then, in later occult and sensationalist imagination, with Baphomet. What had once represented nature, vitality, and the raw forces of life was recast as something demonic. The pattern is unmistakable. What connects man to knowledge, nature, body, spirit, and sovereignty is first feared, then corrupted, then condemned. This is the mechanism I am exposing. It is not merely that symbols were misunderstood. They were repurposed. They were taken from their older meanings and placed under the control of fear. The serpent became the devil. The healer became the witch. The wise woman became the heretic. The dragon became the monster. The bloodline became the villain. The seeker became the sinner. The sovereign mind became the rebel. And now, those who profess to be shedding truth and light often repeat the very same fear-based indoctrination they claim to oppose. They frighten their audiences with bloodlines, devils, hidden rulers, satanic symbols, and apocalyptic warnings, then sell themselves as the only ones brave enough to reveal the truth. But fear is not enlightenment. Fear is control wearing another costume. That is where my message differs entirely. My work does not tell people to fear knowledge. It tells them to seek it. It does not tell them to fear symbols. It asks them to understand them. It does not tell them to worship bloodlines, churches, gurus, governments, or conspiracy merchants. It tells them to stop surrendering their own mind to anyone who profits from their confusion. When a person becomes spiritually enlightened, when they seek knowledge properly, when they stop reading sacred texts as weapons and start understanding the deeper teachings within them, life no longer feels like a roller coaster controlled by outside forces. The universe begins to align with them because they are no longer fighting from fear. They are moving from knowledge, discernment, responsibility, and inner sovereignty. This is why the literal and out of context use of the Bible has caused so much damage. When verses are pulled apart, weaponized, and used to frighten people into obedience, the deeper spiritual teaching is lost. Yet when one returns to the hidden and neglected teachings, including those preserved in the Gospel of Thomas, a very different message appears. The divine is not only above man, distant and unreachable. The kingdom is within. Knowledge is not the enemy. Awakening is not rebellion. The path is not blind obedience, but inner recognition. These messages were taken away, buried, dismissed, or condemned, because they made mankind harder to enslave. A person who knows that God is within cannot be so easily ruled by priests. A person who understands symbolism cannot be so easily frightened by it. A person who trusts their own discernment cannot be so easily led by false prophets. A person who seeks truth for themselves cannot be so easily sold a cage and told it is salvation. That is the heart of my work. My way is not fear. My message is redemption from these constraints. It is the recovery of knowledge, the cleansing of corrupted symbols, the rejection of spiritual slavery, and the return of mankind to its own sovereign path. The dragon was not placed in my work to terrify humanity. It was placed there because the dragon remembers what fear tried to bury: wisdom, guardianship, blood memory, transformation, and the courage to stand outside the lie. This is why this work matters. It is not about defending a bloodline as perfect, nor pretending history is innocent. It is about pulling the discussion out of lazy conspiracy, cheap sensationalism, and borrowed mythology, and placing it back where it belongs. In proper research, historical context, genealogy, symbolism, power, and the long record of how human societies have been governed through fear. The question is not which bloodline rules the world. The better question is who benefits from making people believe that one bloodline does, because once that question is asked, the mask begins to crack. The dragon was never the enemy. The enemy was the mask, placed upon it by systems that feared sovereignty, memory, knowledge, and self-governing people. If you would like to learn more about the Royal Dragon Court, our ethos, and the message we bring forward, you can explore this work further through our books, The Dragon Legacy and The Dragon Seed by my father, Nicholas de Vere, alongside my own works, The Royal Dragon Court, Inbred Britain, A Story of 1,000 Faces, and my upcoming book, Shattering Illusions, The Hidden Lies Behind a Story of 1,000 Faces. Through these books, readers can begin to understand the history, symbolism, bloodline research, and spiritual message behind the Dragon Court legacy. For those who wish to explore whether they may be part of this bloodline themselves, this can be studied further through the genealogical material contained in these works and in the Forgotten Royals of the USA. This message does not end with history alone. My children's books also carry the same deeper purpose, but in a gentler form. They teach kindness, confidence, bravery, creativity, and the importance of imagination. They help normalize the ability of children to use their imagination, harness their skills, and build the emotional foundations they need in life. You can also watch our podcasts and visit our websites to discover the other books and projects we are developing. These works continue to show how our bloodline has been misunderstood, misrepresented, and at times deliberately mistaken for something it is not. Yet even with those mistakes and distortions, one truth remains difficult to deny. So many roads, legends, historical figures, royal houses, noble families, and ancient stories have been shaped through the family lines we study. This is not something I run away from. It is something I carry with pride. That is why we call ourselves the Dragon Bloodline.